Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, Gertrude, and everyone that's listening. My name is Dr. Tristina Anderson, and I am so grateful to be here on the podcast. I am actually currently in Alberta, Canada, where we still have a little bit of snow. But that's where I am right now in this journey of the world. I want to take you to a time, it was in September of 2024. And that was a pivotal moment for me. That was the day I released and did a reading for my memoir. Why that was the pivotal time, I think, in my life. And I've talked about that time where I had two Tristinas in my world. And that's when those two Tristinas converged into the one Tristina that I am here today. So why September 2024 and why the memoir had such an impact in my life? You have to go back a few years. And when I was standing in that room with my peers and some family members and some colleagues, and I was reading a chapter of my memoir that I had kept hidden and private to the core for almost 30 years. And I started to realize that I had these gaps in my life where I wasn't being my true authentic self. People would look at the outside of my life. I had built businesses. I, had some education behind me. 2 beautiful children. I was married. I moved to another country. And so from the outside, people would look at my life and they would say, wow, she has it all. She has all of these things. But inside, they didn't know the true Tristina and the true story, because, like I said, I'd kept that part of me private for almost 30 years. So I'm standing in this room, and I open up to chapter 3 of my memoir, Resilience, Picking Up My Shattered Pieces, and I start to read the cover, or I start to read the chapter that's in there. And as I'm flipping the pages, I stumble, August 1996, and that's where Tristina, in my mind, had split into two. And when I was reading, I talked about what happened in August of 1996. I was 25 years old. I was almost 6 months pregnant. I got married in July of that year to my child's father, and I get a phone call from my doctor's office that said that I had to come in and see him. And I thought, well, geez, that's weird. I told him, I said, well, I'm going camping with my husband. Is it okay if I come in the next week sometime? And they said, no, you need to come in right away. We need to see you. So then I got a little bit nervous. I was like, well, why is my doctor wanting to see me? What's this all about? Again, I was 25 years old, almost 6 months pregnant. So I told my husband at the time, I said, the doctor called me. I need to go in and see what's happening. So he said, okay. And I went. So I'm sitting in the waiting room, and all of these emotions started coming over me. It's like, is there something wrong with my baby and this and that? and feeling very uneasy about, the urgency in this appointment. So I get called into the doctor's office. Now I want to paint a picture of you for you. I am living in a small rural town in Saskatchewan, Canada, and I had known this doctor for the majority of my life. Being in a small town, the physician. So when I walked in, the relationship between him and I was different. I walked in and he was somewhat standoffish. He wasn't standing close to me. He was standing over by the table or by his desk. He had a folder in his hand, and I could feel the tension in the room. And so when I walked in and he said, looking at his folder, and he's looking at me, and he said, Tristina, he said, I got the test results from a life insurance application that myself and my husband had applied for because he was starting a business. And I thought, okay, not sure what this was about, but I was like, okay. And he said to me, your test had come back HIV positive. And I just stood there and I thought, what? That's not possible. 25 years old, I'm almost 6 months pregnant. HIV, that is not something that my ideals back in 1996 was individuals had the same, thought process in 1996, IV drug users and gay men. That was the kind of common thread of the thinking back then. And I was not one of those. So I thought, how is this possible? And then he said to me, or actually I asked him and I said, is it my husband as well? And he said, yes, it's both of you. So fast forward about, an hour later, I get home and just shaking and not sure what to do. And the doctor, like I said, in my appointment, he actually proceeded to tell me that everything I had to do to protect others. And likely my lifespan would be a couple years, and the fate for my unborn child would be about the same, a couple of years. So like I said, fast forward about an hour, I get home, not sure everything I heard and what I'm processing. And I said to my husband, I told him what happened. And in that moment, I knew that he had already gotten that information years earlier. It later came out after a whole bunch of conversations and doctor's appointments and stuff that he had known this years earlier and didn't disclose it to me. So with that scenario in 1996, I kept my HIV health diagnosis private all the way up until September of 2024 when I wrote about it in my memoir. During that time, I ended up having 2 children, both HIV negative, and I stayed married to that man for almost 25 years because in my mind, I thought, well, a couple things. One, who's going to love me as an HIV positive woman? And what is my life expectancy going to look like? So over that time, I built businesses. Like I said, I got an education. And I built an economic platform because I didn't know how many more days I would have in my future to be able to provide for my kids. So again, back forward to September 2024, as I'm reading through these chapters, and I'm on chapter 3 where I talk about my health disclosure, and I'm standing in the front of a room of people I have known for 15, 20 years, professional colleagues, and I am now disclosing this health condition to them. I was absolutely terrified because one of the things I had kept so confidential was the potential fact of rejection. What were people going to say? What were they going to do? How are they going to behave? Would they want to continue doing work with me? Were they going to continue being my friends? I actually didn't disclose my health condition and my kids' dad's health condition until 2018. That's when my kids found out through some steps that I had to go through when my ex-husband and I were going through a divorce. I then disclosed it to them. So up until the latter part of my life, I had kept this very confidential. And I started to realize that I didn't want to put my head down on the pillow for the very last time and have regret in my life and have the people who are closest to me that I've known for years and decades not know who the true person of Tristina was. So I wrote my memoir, spread it to the world, and that's why I'm here now telling this story, because I want to share that regret is heavier than fear. And when you choose courage, you lighten that weight. And so that's why I think it's very important that I share my story, and hopefully others can resonate and take the courage that I've had and share it in their own lives.
Wow. What an incredible story. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing this story with so much courage and grace. You know, just listening to you speak, and for somebody who came from the background I come from, it is a miracle that we are here, we're alive. With science and technology, things have changed so much for people who are HIV positive. I think you know that my youngest brother died. And so this is a subject that is very, very, very close to my heart. Now, you've lived with this powerful secret for years. What did that silence cost you?
A lot. Friendships, right? When I think about the things I didn't have in my life, that's where I think regret comes in, right? I can look at the things I had, right? I built businesses, I had an education, I had 2 beautiful children. I had those things that we tick off those boxes of life, right? Oh, I got that, so I must be successful. I got that, I must be successful. But internally, that's where I think the real gap is. For one, I wasn't living my true authentic self. 2, I was living almost always in a state of being petrified that people would find out. So when you're living in that life state, you don't have the ability to have connections with others. So in reality, I never really had any true friends, because how do you build a really solid friendship when you're keeping the most authentic thing about yourself private? You erode those relationships. So I think when I think of a lot of the things that I sacrificed or I didn't actually have fulfillment, it was all internal. It was all personal. And that's heavy to carry.
I can imagine carrying it for so many years as well. Wow.
Yeah.
So, if you had to choose one moment that changed the trajectory of your life, what would it be and why?
I'd have to say that September 2024, standing in front of the room with my memoir, it was different writing the memoir and having the courage, right? So I had to self-talk myself into writing the memoir. And then it's like, well, I'm only have to write it. I don't have to publish it. And then publishing the memoir, well, maybe nobody will read it. But I had a really good colleague that says, okay, so now you have to get up. We're going to do a book signing and you're going to read it. So then in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm going to find the most easiest thing that I can get in front of the group and talk about. She said, no. You need to talk about your HIV. And I'm like, I don't think I have the courage to do that. But I did. And it allowed me the opportunity to, 1, stand in my truth, and 2, be in a situation where there wasn't the rejection of loved ones, of friends, of family, of colleagues, which I had played in my mind was going to be part of that. So I have to say, I have a lot of really wonderful life moments, but I think September 2024, when I stood in front of a group of individuals and spoke my words out loud, that's totally put me on the trajectory of where I am now. Gave me the courage to stand in front of others, be on podcasts like yours, and share my story.
Now, you say that fear isn't the real problem, avoidance is. When did you first realize this?
I think it's I'm always very curious about why things happen in our lives. Why did certain things, and we could live in, why me and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I talk about is regret is heavier than fear. And when you think about that on the surface, yeah, regret is heavier than fear, but fear is instant, right? It's something that, something will happen. It's an instant reaction and it'll subside if you don't take action or that immediate threat is gone. But regret, which is the same as avoidance, right? You're avoiding making a decision. That regret, it accumulates over time. And it's the regret of not making the decisions, the fear-based decisions, the avoiding of making decisions. It's the regret that accumulates, that you carry with you. And I didn't want to live my life with regret as best as I could, right? I wanted to say, I'm willing to lean in. I'm willing to take the chances. I'm not sure what's going to be on the outside of that. But when you avoid making a decision, that's where regret starts to build.
I like that. And I always said that for me, failure is not having tried. The regret of not having given something a go would be failure.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you try and you know what will come on the other side of that. Now, what are the most common ways that you see women avoiding their truth?
I think the first primary one is their self, right? They look for external, at least in my experience and the people I've worked with, they look for external validation because they're struggling internally with their own perceived lack of self-confidence or where they fit in the world, right? And I think when it comes to ourselves, we look at others for validation instead of knowing truly in ourselves that we're created the way the universe, creator, God, however that terminology resonates, is we are our best selves. And it takes a lot for us to, at least myself as well, to get there to say, I am the best me. I was made this way and I'm going to show up in the world this way. And I think that's the hardest part, is our true authentic selves, because we fear rejection, right? We have this ridiculous measuring stick. And that's, again, where I was looking at my life and other people would look at my life externally. And I thought, I need to pull back that life curtain to people that know us, like, yeah, it's not all of this stuff we see on other things. Even in reality, people saw, I lived in another country, I owned an airline, I had these businesses, I had all of these things, but behind my life curtain, there was a lot. And I thought I got to a point where I really needed to share that.
So what does avoidance look like in leadership today, do you think?
Sorry, say it again, Gertrude.
What does avoidance look like in leadership today?
Oh my goodness, it looks like so many things that are masked, right? It's not making a decision because your business is growing, not hiring, not terminating, not standing in, not making a business operational decision. Again, it comes back to if you're an entrepreneur or a leader, the self. We sometimes feel, I know I've been there, that our staff or our external group look to us for answers. And we feel that we need to have all of the answers instead of showing up to say, I think today's going to be an ugly day. And I'm not sure I have all the answers. But when you come in and you're your true authentic self and you're sharing some of those challenges with your staff, with your partners, with your groups and stuff like that, they then too are going to show, and just like, yeah, you know what, it is going to be not a great day today, but we're being authentic because I'm 55. So in my business generation, the CEOs, the leaders are expected to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to be vulnerable, showing up to say, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, but I'm going to give it my all today.
That is so true. So how do you help someone recognize the cost of staying stuck?
So I have a couple of different things. I have my Fearless Living program, but I also have embedded into that, I have the REAL framework, right? So I think that's where, the REAL is kind of an acronym for recognize, evaluate, act, and live. And it goes down to some of the root causes. Again, a very simple acronym to really look at all decisions, right? I do it all the time, right? I'll look at, I'll recognize something that's happening in a situation. What's driving this? Is it internal? Is it external? Because I think that's also equally important. If we feel a certain something bubbling up, what's happening externally, but what's also happening internally, right?
Yeah.
Evaluating the situation. Is this a fear-based decision? What's the outcome going to look like? Let's fast forward 1, 3, 5 years down the road. And then you have to act. You have to make a decision. If you don't make a decision, that's where this whole cycle goes, right? It
Mhm.
just continues on and on. And I'll give you as an example, right? Let's just say, I decide I want to buy a new chair, something, for your home and something like that. But you
Yes.
consistently don't make that decision, right? That just kind of continues to bubble up. Whether you like it or not, you have to decide. And once
Yeah.
you decide, you release it to move on to something else. And it gets even more intense if you have a business, you're wanting to grow, you're wanting to hire, you're wanting to change business philosophies. You have to make a decision, you have to act. And then once you've acted, then you have to live into that decision and take the steps you can with where you are, with what you have. And like I said, I do it all the time. I think when we get up in the morning, we subconsciously do the things we have to do. Some of them are, again, subconscious, but I
Yes.
do things, try to do things, I shouldn't say I do things. I try to do things more consciously to say, are these decisions in alignment with where I want to go and what I want to do and what I want to be and what I want to have? Um, and it sometimes gets a little scary, right? When it's those bigger life moments.
I love that. So, what is the difference between being in fear and using fear as information?
So being in fear, I think to me is that immediate reaction, right? So I'll take you back. I mean, I've had lots of different opportunities in my life.
Mhm.
Again, when my doctor told me I was HIV positive and I was 6 months pregnant, right? That's fear, right? I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. Um, that's fear. I made a decision though that I had to figure out what tomorrow was going to look like. So I couldn't stay stuck in that, because I
Mhm.
think if you're staying stuck, it's in that mindset of why did this happen? Woe was me, and all of these things.
Yeah.
Another example is when my ex-husband and we got divorced in 2018. I met a man. Didn't think that that was an opportunity for me because of my health condition, but I met this wonderful man. Um, and I knew that I had to make a decision of whether I was going to disclose my health condition to him or not. We dated for about 6 months, and I knew it got to a point where I had to disclose, right? Before it got any further. And
Yes.
that was fear again, the fear of rejection, the fear of being vulnerable, all of these things. But I took the step and I disclosed. And to him, it was, that doesn't change how I feel about you, which
Yeah.
then released all of that stuff. But had I
Yeah.
not made the decision, I would have lived in that fear cycle. Why didn't I do this? Or I should have said this. And we go back and beat ourselves up sometimes when we don't think we say the right things or do the right things, and just say, I did what I did with the knowledge I had, and I'm going to move on, right? If I had a little more things, I might have did it a little bit more polished, but I think that's the difference of recognizing fear, assessing it, right? That's where that whole real framework comes in, recognizing it, assessing it, and not living into that. And that's where that decision comes in, is you have to take the steps.
So, what is one decision that someone listening right now and might be avoiding, and how can they take that first step in making that decision?
I think one of the things I do when I work with my clients is, again, it goes back to, it sounds like a simple philosophy, but regret is heavier than fear. When
Yeah.
you have a situation that's in front of you and it's fearful, again, maybe it's going to the doctor's office, maybe it's telling somebody how you feel about them, maybe it's fixing a fractured relationship, maybe it's building a business, whatever that situation is, the regret of not following through with that has to be heavier than the decision of being fearful.
Yeah.
And that, I know, when I sit down and I look at a potential situation, moving to Mexico with my 2 kids, like moving to another country, I was petrified. But I got to a point where I thought, if I don't at least try, I
Yeah.
am going to regret this decision. And that regret was heavier than the fear was. And I think everybody has to get to that platform that the regret of not making that decision has to become heavier than what the fear is.
I love that. That is such a beautiful reminder. Now, if I could take you back in a thought experiment to go and meet the younger you, that 25-year-old woman who was hit with a bombshell, whose life literally came to pieces. If you could go back and give her three nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those three nuggets of wisdom be? Just in case there's somebody who's listening to us right now who's feeling like, what am I supposed to do next?
Oh wow, that's heavy. I think I'd go back to my younger self, and I'd say it's going to be okay. I think when we look at ourselves internally, we have to be able to rely on knowing that our future already knows what the rollouts are going to be. So that's one thing I would say is it's going to be okay. The other one I would say is always do it afraid, right? It's opportunities, really wonderful blessings in my life have come in at some of the most painful times and the most scary times. And I had to do it afraid, not knowing what the next step was going to be. However, knowing that something on the other end was on the other side was going to be worth that. And I think the third one is, even though I haven't fully embraced this yet, is have the time to spend with all of the loved ones in your life. That's one of the things that I consistently work on and trying to do, is finding time when I can and when others can, is to really live into life. Because I know, at least I think, we're only here one time. And leaning into what life has to offer us is probably the third thing. Again, do it afraid. It's going to be okay. But the third one would be really lean into life and live it the best you can, full out. Because at the end of the day, well, even when I look at myself, as I don't want to put my head on the pillow for the last time and say, I wish I did. I want to say, or I said I would, instead of saying I wish I would have done these things, I want to say I'm glad I did. And I think that's the three things I would tell myself.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I do like that last one. That you have to die trying, even if
Yeah.
it fails. You don't want to live with the regret that you didn't try.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. And now let's teleport you into the future this time. And we are going to go and sit and have a conversation with a 90-year-old you. Maybe she's sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, or with you and science and technology. You'll be on a dance floor somewhere. If you could go into the future to meet this wise woman who has led you up until this point, what will you say to her when you finally meet her?
Oh, geez, that's another tough one. Well, for one, I'd give her a hug. And I think I would say, I'm glad that you took the steps that you had, that you did it afraid, that you embraced everything that life has thrown your way, right? There's been obviously some earthquake moments in my life. And, I'm going to be very proud of her for standing in her truth, sharing her story, taking what I've learned on my journey and sharing it with others. So I think at the end of the day, like I said, even though I'm 55, I've just realized over the last couple of years is what my purpose is. And my purpose is to share my story, what I've learned along the way. And so I think in my future self, I'm going to be very proud of her for sharing that.
I love that. The other reason why I love asking women that question is a lot of women don't realize that the wise woman is already in us, that she is that quiet voice that whispers, go left, go right, say
Mhm.
yes, say no. But we look outside of ourselves for answers and solutions all the time instead of going within.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for listening to your wise woman as she guides you in this life. Thank you for empowering other people to live life to the full, to break that fear barrier, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And now you're empowering so many people through the sharing of your story. It's been a real honor interviewing you today.
Thanks, Gertrude. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We are a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to help take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So if you are a woman, a leader, somebody who's feeling stuck, you can't see the wood from the trees right now, reach out and get the help and support you need. We have this incredible woman who is sharing her story. This is what she does. She empowers others to step into those places of greatness. Or if you know someone, somebody who's struggling, somebody who's stuck, please tag them on this video, share this podcast on your social media, and let us help and reach more people as well. So I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Dr. Anderson, thanks again for the interview.
Thanks, Gertrude. Take care.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.